In 1948, with the first edition of this book on its way to the printers, a folder landed on a desk in New York. Inside was the chance to buy half of a growing insurance company. The industry was out of fashion that year, and the file's worn corners told its history. The deal had already been offered to, and turned down by, quite a few important Wall Street houses. It had been passed around like a plate nobody wanted. The two partners who now opened it did not care about fashion. By the book's own telling, they looked at exactly two things: what the company earned and what it owned, and held those against the asking price. The numbers were plainly, almost embarrassingly good. And somewhere between the second check of the sums and the third, you can feel the thing that makes this story worth telling. These men wanted it. Wanted it enough to do what they did next, which was to put about 1/5 of everything they managed into this single company. 1/5. Into one company. These were the most careful men on Wall Street. Their fund famously held 100 different issues at a time, precisely so that no single mistake could ever hurt them. And this decision broke their own oldest rule. The junior partner was Jerome Newman. The senior partner was Benjamin Graham, who, at that very moment, was correcting the proofs of the most respected book on investing ever written. The company was the Government Employees Insurance Company, GEICO, and what happened next embarrassed every rule in the shop, patiently, one after another. The price of the shares rose to 200 times what the partners had paid. Graham admits that almost from the start the price looked too high by his own standards. The advance, he notes, far outstripped the actual growth of the profits, and the shop's discipline said, plainly, sell what has grown expensive. They didn't. They had come to regard the company, he writes, as a sort of family business, and they simply kept it. So did a large number of the people whose money they managed, ordinary clients of a careful fund, people who had signed up for safety and 100 small positions. And those people became millionaires from this one holding, the way a passenger becomes a traveler, by staying in the seat. Then Graham closes his book with an act of accounting courage that has few equals in the literature of money. He tallies his own life's work in plain sight. The profits from this single decision, he writes, far exceeded the sum of all the others. Everything the shop had earned across 20 years of wide-ranging operations, all the investigation, the endless pondering, the countless individual decisions. The list of labors is his own. 20 years of rules, out-earned by the one day the rules were broken. He prints it anyway, in full. And on the record of those 20 careful years, one line of fairness from Jason Speak's notes. The roughly 20% a year Graham reports appears not to count the firm's fees. The figure after fees, still among the best on Wall Street's books, was lower. A lesser writer would have buried that arithmetic in an appendix. Graham prints it in his final pages, and then interrogates it, in the sentence that audits his whole life. Was this one lucky break, or one supremely shrewd decision? Can we tell them apart? His answer has two honest halves. The first, no, not entirely. Luck was in the room, and he says so. But then the second half, and it carries the whole shape of his life. Behind the luck or the crucial decision, there must usually exist a background of preparation and discipline capacity. And here the old man reaches, without seeming to notice, for a familiar sound. One needs to be sufficiently established, he writes, that such opportunities will knock at one's particular door, and one must have the means, the judgment, and the courage to take advantage of them. Hear what that sentence carries. 20 years of the madman's knock, every trading morning, and the slip sliding under the door unread while the ledger stayed open on the table. Then, once in a lifetime, a different knock, and the two partners were the ones ready to answer it. Means in hand, judgment trained, courage already paid for. Jason Zweig adds the detail that squares the whole story with the rest of the book. The price was so low that Graham had satisfied himself he could liquidate the company, sell it off whole, for about what he was paying. The bet was enormous in size. By his scale, the only scale this book ever used. It was barely a bet at all. The rule break had been purchased in advance by 20 years of keeping the rules. But the book will not let the story warm your hands without showing you its twin. The rules ran the other way once, and Graham printed that too. In 1916, a young analyst walked through a mahogany door to pitch a strange little machine company he loved, and was sent back to his desk with a warning. Nothing behind it but water. The rules, remember, were right about the water. The old man at that desk had read the bonds correctly, and the little company grew up anyway, and took a new name, International Business Machines. And Graham, obedient all his life to the very discipline that would one day let him buy GEICO, never owned a share of it. He told that story on himself in a lecture, and had it printed in the back pages of this book, a few dozen pages from the GEICO triumph. Hold the two stories together, because Graham bound them into one volume on purpose. Picture them as two lines in a ledger, in the same careful hand. One line reads, "The greatest company of the age, seen early, touched with his own hands, never bought, the rules said no." The other reads, "An unfashionable insurance file nobody wanted, bought past all prudence. The rules, kept for 20 years, had earned the right to say yes. The rules cost him IBM, the rules bought him GEICO." Two ledger lines, both his, both printed, neither excused. And the honest sum of the two is still the whole argument of the book. A discipline that misses some miracles and survives all the wrecks will, over a lifetime, quietly win. It takes an unusual man to publish both lines about himself. That man is why this book outlived every hot system of its century. 50 years after Security Analysis was published, Columbia held an anniversary conference for the textbook, and the main speaker was a student from Ben Graham's old classroom, the one who had offered, years before, to work for Graham's firm for nothing, and was, in his own words, turned down as overvalued. He took this value stuff very seriously. Graham relented eventually and hired him. The student went home to Omaha, applied this book for 30 years, and became the most famous investor in the world. His name is Warren Buffett. His talk that day is reprinted in the back of this book, and it answers the last objection anyone ever raises. The professors of that era talked that beating the market was luck. Flip coins long enough and somebody flips 20 heads running. Fine, says Buffett, and he grants the professors their whole premise. Get 225 million orangutans flipping coins. And after 20 days, you would expect about 215 insufferably proud orangutans with perfect records. And it would mean nothing at all. But, and here the room leans in, suppose you then discovered that 40 of those winners came from one particular zoo in Omaha. You would go straight to that zookeeper, and you would ask what he was feeding them. Then he presents the animals, the investors of one small intellectual village he names Graham-and-Doddsville, each holding a long public record the coin flip theory cannot laugh off. Chief among them, a man named Walter Schloss, who never went to college. He took Graham's night course, and then simply did the thing. For 28 years. Buffett's description of his method is one sentence long. If a business is worth $1 and I can buy it for 40 cents, something good may happen to me. And he does it. Buffett says over and over and over again. And Buffett offers one last observation about the idea itself that explains this book's strange history. The notion of buying dollar bills for 40 cents, he has found, either takes with a person immediately or it never takes at all. It's like an inoculation. Show a man the records for 10 years. It makes no difference, which is why the student could stand in a public hall and give the entire method away, exactly as his teacher had done in a public book. Ships will sail around the world, but the Flat Earth Society will flourish. Benjamin Graham died in 1976. The boy from the boarding house, the clerk who saw the exchange close for a war, the man who lost 70 cents of every dollar and rebuilt on rules, the teacher whose students taught everyone else. Near the end, almost 80, he told a friend what he still hoped to do with each day. Something foolish, something creative, and something generous. The eulogy that preserves that line is printed at the front of this book, and it was written by Buffett, the student burying the teacher. It ends with a borrowed image. Walter Lippmann spoke of men who plant trees that other men will sit under. Ben Graham, his student, wrote, was such a man. And the book ends exactly where it began, with a promise it refuses to make. Graham cannot pledge his readers a GEICO, and says so in as many words. We cannot promise a like spectacular experience. Then he does one last thing, and it closes a circle 40 years wide. He will not end, he says plainly, with Raskob's old slogan, the one from the magazine lying face down on this table, the promise that everybody ought to be rich. The boy who cashed a $5 check had learned, at 13, what a promise is worth when nobody weighs it. The old man declined, on his last page, to sell one. What he offers instead is what he proved, that the work is honest, that the discipline holds, and that for the investor with the temper for it, the three-ring circus of Wall Street holds both enjoyment and profit. His actual last words to the reader are kinder than any forecast, and they are the right last words for his book, so they can be the last words here too. Excitement is guaranteed.